This is Mark McNeese, and you're listening to One Thing or Another, interviews and conversations. Welcome to the podcast. This is your host, Mark, here. It's been a while since I've done one of these, but it's a new year with new energy and new focus, and I will be doing lots of engaging interviews in 2022. The first one is with book reviewer Terri Schlichenmeyer, also known as The Bookworm Says. Terri has been doing reviews, syndicated reviews, for quite a while now, and I've had the pleasure of including them at my site for LGBT people over 50, the older folks, lgbtsr.com, and also at my website. So Terri, you're in Wisconsin. Say hello and give us the rundown on where you're at and what's going on there, weather-wise, that sort of thing.
It is 14 degrees here, and we actually don't have a lot of snow here, where I am in my home on our property. We have probably maybe only 6 inches. In some spots, that's probably the most. It's chilly. It's going to get chillier. I think we're supposed to have snow in 5 on Thursday or something ridiculous like that. But 'tis winter, and I think there are 8 weeks till spring, something like that. So I'll take it.
We just had a little bit of a snowstorm here on Saturday. It wasn't terrible, but I work in a grocery store, and I knew that about 80% of those associates were going to call out, which they did. But it was a nice slow day. It wasn't difficult. It wasn't hard to get through, but it wasn't a terrible storm either. And then you mentioned your property. You recently, did you build that house?
Yes, we built a house about a little over 3 years ago. Well, 4 summers ago.
Well, time goes so fast that it seems like yesterday, but I know, I'm just curious about how that came about. You found the property, and did you design the house? I just want to know about that a little bit.
We wanted out of town. We wanted out of town, but we didn't want too far out of town. So we started looking in the county we were at, and we realized that the prices were just too much. So we went to the next county, and the property we found actually was an IRS seizure.
Oh.
And the realtor warned us that it was going to take a very, very long time, which we were prepared for. In the meantime, we started looking at houses, and we bought a whole pile of those, home plan books that you find everywhere. And there were a couple things that we liked and things that we didn't like, and I had a house that I had decided on. And when we sat down, after we had sat down with the architect and started hammering things out, I actually found another book at a book sale, and my significant other said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I guess I don't know. I'm just looking. I'm looking." So I looked, and there was the house that we really wanted. There was what was in our minds was accident. We found it accidentally, so we modified it a little bit for our needs. Totally handicapped, accessible, because we're not getting any younger. No one is.
Right.
And it's a poured concrete home. If anybody's interested in one of them, you will never, ever, ever regret it. It's solid, it's quiet, it's energy efficient, it's wonderful.
Now I have a question real shortly, because we're outside of town too, but we're 6 miles to the nearest town. And the only thing that I wish I had was the ability to walk into town. Are you far enough out of town that you have to drive?
We have to drive, yes. Yes, there's a dairy farm kitty corner from where I'm sitting. So that'll tell you a little bit. We are semi-rural, we live in a subdivision, technically speaking, but there's a dairy farm kitty corner from us, and if I go up a little ways, there's a couple of Amish farms, and actually if I drive half a mile and one way and a mile the other way, I'll find all kinds of, seed farms and people that raise chickens and people that raise corn, and so it's very much semi-rural, and there's not even, I don't even think there's a bike path out here, because there's an interstate that crosses between my house and town. And town, I use the word loosely, there are literally 10,003 people, and that was just announced in the paper a few weeks ago. So, well,
that's not too small. I mean, our nearest town is, I don't know, might be 1,000 people.
Oh yeah, this is it's very small, and that's okay. It tends to be, it's very, very, how do I say this? Live and let live. Real loose, real, everybody, nobody seems to bother anybody. It's a great place to live. So.
Well, I like that.
Except cold. So.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very cold there. Now, one of the things you have in your home, since we're going to move on into books, is a lot of books.
I have a lot of books.
Terri?
I have a library. I have a library in my home. One of the things that we incorporated in building the house was a very large area for a very large library. I have somewhere around 17,000 books, somewhere in that general vicinity. So yeah, it takes up a lot of room, but where they are is climate controlled. It's dry. There's no sunlight down there. They're all in the basement. It's on a solid foundation where they're not going to, ruin the structure of the house. Everything is nicely shelved, and yeah. I'm sure you know, but I am also a book writer, and I'm working on my second and third books currently. And so that yesterday I went downstairs with a list and found the things I needed that were going to be research materials. And so I basically have my own research library in my house.
Well, that's got to make it a little bit easier, along with search engines.
Yeah. Yes.
Just the first book. Tell us about the first book real quick, and then we'll talk about young adult books.
The first book I did was the first book I did was completely Wisconsin centric. The last one is a long form trivia book. It's not trivia question and answer. It's facts. Some of them are in essay form. Some are in just small 1 and 2 sentences. It's a book you can give your grandchildren. A friend of mine sent me a picture over the weekend of her 9 or 10-year-old son who is just devouring the book, but yet it's also appropriate for older readers too. So it's that kind of a book, and it's fun.
Now, you are a book reviewer, syndicated, for quite some time. We won't spend a lot of time on that. But I wanted specifically to talk to you about young adult books. I don't know if I've ever read. I must have read one at some point, but
I'm sure you have.
That when I was a young adult, depends on what they were. I mean, like A Separate Piece. I read a lot of things, but I don't remember that specific category. And you had said that you had been receiving a lot of LGBTQ plus themed young adult books, and I wanted to talk about that because it also ties into an ongoing effort in the country right now to ban books with LGBT content and all, black content, all kinds of content. But
first to say that you haven't read them is probably, if you're of a certain age, it's probably possible, because young adult or YA, and I'll refer to them as YA books. YA books really weren't a thing when we were kids. Mm-hmm. They were books that kids were given, but they were not called YA books or young adult books back then so much.
Yeah, okay.
What constitutes them? They're meant for kids, and again, I use the word kids loosely. They're meant for young adults ages 12 to 17. So some of them are a little bit. A 17-year-old might scoff. So they're in that, but they're in that range of 12 to 17-year-olds, and that's basically how it's determined. Now, even that is morphing, because a lot of adults do read young adult books because of the way they're formatted and the way they're written. There's a subgroup, and I think it's something called, I don't even remember the name of it. I have not heard it in years. Publishers were thinking of making a category for 17 to 23-year-olds, but I have not heard whatever the term was that they were going to call it. I haven't heard it in years, and so it remains young adult books and whatever. But young adult books are specifically meant for 12 to 17-year-olds.
Yeah, and you're right, because I went to the library a lot when I was a kid, and of course there would have been sections that were dedicated to age groups. So right. I just don't remember, like you said, I don't remember anything being called a young adult book. It was just a book.
It wasn't called. Yeah, I think I want to say it was called like teen section or something like that. So you could have found it, or the librarian would have steered you there, or maybe it was a separate room of some sort. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. I remember is that it was a separate room, but yet I think that, you know, of course, a 10-year-old can read some of the books that are aimed at the younger end of that's 12 to 17 spectrum, and like I said, adults will read young adult books. So it's not hard and fast. It's not, oh, you know, you're 14, you can only have this. We were steered toward the things that were appropriate to us, but now they have a name, I guess, is the bottom line.
Well, sure, and it's also a genre for authors. There are authors who write those.
Right.
Some very successfully. Now, I certainly don't remember any kind of LGBT plus books aimed, you know, at my age groups when I was.
I don't either, and that's the interesting thing. I don't either. I just don't think that it was a thing then. I don't remember. I can't recall anything like that would have had that. I think that. I can't tell you why that is. There had to have been them, but I don't think that it would have been in a public library or
no, and it probably would have been in almost a coded way, or it would have been.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. Yes.
Because I remember reading Patricia Now Warren's The Front Runner when I was a teenager, but that wasn't really aimed at young people. Mm-hmm. And there weren't very. Kids today, I get books that say ages 3 to 7, and I look at them and I know there's no self-respecting 7-year-old who's going to read them, you know. And I'm talking books in general. So kids read across the spectrum. You used to say, okay, you used to be able to say, all right, this picture book is probably for kids under 5, and this book here is for kids under 9. But that's not so anymore, because younger kids, I've seen 9-year-olds reading young adult books. So it's just really all over the place. But I think it's a general guideline to say that a young adult book is for teens, I guess, it would be a blanket statement. Now, what are some of the things that are distinct about young adult books with LGBTQ stories and themes?
To answer that would be to tell you how they're different from adult books overall. Young adult books are similar to adult novels. They are more chaste. You will absolutely not see anything that is overt sexually. It'll be hinted at, and it might not even then it might not even be there. You're looking probably at kisses rather than anything more. It depends on the author, and it depends on the age that someone is targeting. I read a young adult book about 2 gay men, and there was very hinted at sex. It was a little more explicit than I thought it was going to be. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, young adult books have no explicitness in them. There's a little more drama, as you would expect from a teenager's point of view. So the drama goes, the high school drama, that kind of thing. But it's not, it's comparable to what an adult might see in their lives. So I guess it's what you would expect from a teen book, or what you would expect that a teenager would read. High school drama, mean girls, mean guys, you know, falling in love for the first time. It's that kind of thing. And that's what you're going to find in a young adult book and in an LGBTQ young adult book. It's the same thing, only with boys and with girls.
Oh, I like that. Then why you said you've been seeing a lot of these. Why would there be more? Is that just, you know?
I can't tell you why there would be, except I think that there's become an acceptance for LGBTQ literature for that age group. And I think there's been a demand for it. Kids who want to read that stuff have never had such a chance to find so much before. And I also am noticing overall, anecdotally, with the kids I know who are that age, that they're not against reading, girls who read romance books, young adult romance books, are not against reading romance books with gay characters or lesbian characters. They're not against it. So I think there's a general acceptance that I'm overjoyed to see.
Good. And romance, by the way, is a huge genre.
Mm-hmm.
And it's primary.
I asked a 13-year-old once, she said, I love romances. Can I have some romances, of the pile of books I had? And I said, yeah, you can read these. I said, what about gay ones? She shrugged her shoulders like, yeah, just give me the books. And I thought, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome.
And just, it's a little bit tangentially, romance, by the way, like I said, it's a huge genre, and I'm aware of it because I write gay mysteries. And it's almost exclusively written by women, not completely, but it is mostly written by straight women for straight women because they like it.
Yes. Yeah, I don't doubt that. I find it interesting and very uplifting that many voracious young readers are not bothered by picking up a book that's obviously not for them, if that made any sense.
Yeah, and it struck me when you said there was a demand for it, because all of a sudden I was wondering why, like, say you're 15 and you want to read more LGBTQ. It's such an awkward acronym, but I don't like using the word queer. If you want to read more of those, like, who do you tell? Do you tell the librarian? Do you tell your parent? Like, who do you tell that you want more books like this?
You don't have to tell anybody. You just have to go to a bookstore or library. They're there.
They go by who?
They're all over.
All right.
By who depends. There are a lot of emerging novelists who are writing that stuff. Emerging or novelists who are already established, who are kind of branching out a little bit. The interesting thing is I find that they are not the LGBTQIA books, and that's a mouthful too.
Yeah.
They're not put in a separate spot. They're going to be on the shelf with the other books. And the best thing to do is don't be embarrassed. If you want to read an LGBTQ book, ask the bookseller, ask the librarian, because you know what? They've seen it all. They've seen it all. They know where that stuff is put on the shelf because they put it there. So that should tell you everything. Go ahead and ask.
I just joined the I don't know if it's the American Librarian Association. I don't have it in front of me, but I just joined because librarians are awesome people, and the organization that represents them, or a lot of them, is pushing back against these efforts to prohibit young people from reading these books or having access to them. And I guess that can lead us into the next topic, which is about this push that I see in the news almost every day now in school boards, where you have parents. It's too long a topic to talk about because I think it is. I think it's dark. Oh, go ahead.
First, let me say, librarians are the superheroes of our world.
Yeah.
Okay. Because not only do they know stuff, but if they don't know stuff, they can find out. I have never, ever, in my whole entire life, never stumped a librarian, ever. And that takes true dedication, and they're superheroes. Let's just say plain and simple. Now, as for the banned books, I'm horrified. I'm absolutely horrified. But to put it into perspective, kids are always going to get what they want to get.
Yeah.
Books that my parents very, very seldom said, no, you can't read that. Once in a while, my mother would say, I think that's a little too old for you, but she'd let me have it anyway to try. The bottom line is kids are going to get the books that they want to read, and the more you tell them that they can't have it, the more they're going to look for it. And even if they have to go to a public library or to a friend's house and look at what their parents are reading, they're going to get the book. if they want it bad enough. They're going to get the book.
Yeah.
I don't like banning. I think banning backfires. I think that it can be taken too far, that it becomes out of hand. But the bottom line is, I think we're righteously making a big deal over it, but I also think that in the end, curiosity and availability and other people who aren't so worried about it are going to win in the end, because if someone wants a book, they're going to get it.
When I was a kid, I stole a couple of books from the bookstore. One was called On Being Different by Merle Miller. It was about a man talking about being gay. And I might have been the front runner for Tisha L. Warren's book too, because I didn't know how else to get them. So I stole them, and I was afraid to buy them because, somebody might know that I was a little gay teenager. Yeah. And I also joined the Psychology Today book club, believe it or not, specifically so that I could get books about sexuality. And I would order them through the book club, and nobody was the wiser.
Were we separated at birth? Because for my 14th birthday, I asked for a subscription to Psychology Today, and my parents thought I was the weirdest child that they had ever known.
It was,
and the thing is, you don't have to steal books anymore.
Oh, that's true.
You can just go and find them. The public library will have them. You can buy them at a bookstore. Bookstores all carry those kinds of books, and like I said, there's no need to be embarrassed any longer. And I don't think that teenagers so much are anymore. I think that they're willing to embrace things now.
And they have the internet. I didn't have the internet when I was a kid. Yeah,
no, we didn't. And that's something I saw on Facebook this morning. People who ban books forget that there's an internet. So, like I said, kids are going to find these things, and so banning them it's kind of a pathetic. It's a pathetic act to assert control that it isn't really. If someone's determined enough, isn't going to work.
It's also, and then I'll move on from the topic. It's not about the kids. It never is. It's about power and control, and it's about dark money, and it's about making sure people stay angry and vote, and has nothing to do with protecting children. If you wanted to protect children from inappropriate content, you would never give them a Bible. I mean, that's just the truth.
Yeah, and again, I go back to the fact that I think today's 12 to 17-year-olds largely are a whole lot open-minded about that thing. They're watching their parents run in circles and saying, "Oh, you can't read this, you can't read that," and the child probably already has. I keep coming back to that. When I was 11, I was babysitting, and the lady I was babysitting for had a copy of Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Sex, and I read it. And I didn't tell my mom until I was probably 15, and she said, "Oh," because I was going to get it sooner or later sometime if I wanted to read it. And at that point, I was reading everything. So it just doesn't, if kids want it, they're going to get it. And I guess I keep coming back to that.
Now, do you happen to have a few books in this category that you could recommend, or that you think were especially
There
good?
Are so many of them. So to nail down one, no. There are just so many of them. I do have one of my go-to recommends, and this would be mostly for an older teen, because it's the tone of it and the words in it and the meaning behind it is too overwhelming for a young teen, 12, 13, 14, 15. But the higher end of that, The Absolutist by John Boyne, one of my absolute favorite books of all time ever. And it's the story of a man in post World War II who was a soldier. He was a soldier. And his best friend's sister contacts him and asks him, "What happened to my brother? How did he die?" And the dead man was the other man's best friend. And he decides that the sister needs to know. and he tells her. And it has small shades of sex in it. It's a little bordering on graphic, but not horribly so, not anything you'd find not pornographic. Absolutely an LGBTQ story, beautifully written. It's something older teens could handle. It's an adult book, and that's the beauty of this. If you have a gay teen who is older, the beauty of this is that it's so easy for you and him or her to share some of the things that are in the older age group of that spectrum, the older part of that.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many things that are almost crossovers between young adult and adult books. You may pick up a YA book and read it and not really even know that it was a young adult book. So if you are an adult without a teen in your life who is gay or lesbian, try one of these books, because they're actually kind of fun. For an adult, they're a quick read. It'll take you a couple of days maybe. They're not, no matter how thick they are, they could be 400 pages, and you're going to get it through it pretty quick, because it's that kind of a story or that kind of a novel. But those kinds of things you can share with your teen or your child, grandchild, whatever, because they're written for teens, but they're really quite sophisticated, which you again would expect from today's 12 to 17-year-old.
Well, Terri, it's been good to talk to you again. We don't talk that often, and
yes.
I'm still very fond.
Enough.
I'm still very fond of Wisconsin. My friend, my co-host on these other podcasts I do, Rick, lives there. He's in the North Woods. Up
there. It's cold up there.
Yes.
And snowy.
Eagle River.
Snowmobiles. Yeah.
Somewhere over there.
Yeah.
And
snowmobiles.
And I think you're going to survive the politics somehow. You will.
Eventually, it is what it is. And, so.
But it was great to talk to you and get some information. And of course, now I'm thinking of books that I read when I was a teenager that had to have been young adult books. I just, like we said, they weren't called that. It wasn't like a marketing. Yeah. It wasn't a marketing thing so much back then.
I think back when we were that age, I think what happened was we just kind of naturally morphed into them. After a while, you read enough of books for 9-year-olds, and you were 12 years old, and you were like, what next? And I think you just naturally kind of migrated to them, is what I remember. But then again, I was a weird kid, and I read adult books even as a kid.
Well, so did I. I was reading at a college level in my teens, in my early teens.
Yeah.
But that was us.
Yeah, and that was us. But I like I said, for your listeners, I challenge you, go to your bookstore, go to your library, and ask for a young adult book, a young adult LGBTQ YA book. And ask for one and give it a try, because I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised. And the good news is it's going to open up a whole new genre for you to enjoy and even share.
Thank you again, and you'll hear from me soon the next time I pick a book, one of your books.
Awesome.
And
thank you.
Don't freeze. Don't be too cold.
No, I'm in my office. I'm good.
Okay. We'll talk to you the next time.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye. You've been listening to One Thing or Another, interviews and conversations with your host, Mark McNeese, brought to you by Maidmark Publishing. Find us on iTunes, Amazon, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to your favorite podcasts.